Hey YouTube, I want to talk about something that's been becoming more salient in my awareness recently, which is some of the effects that my childhood had on me now, particularly around what I was like at school and how I learned to be and that kind of thing, and how that's affecting me now. So I was recently at an event called Kai Camp, organized by a guy called Kai here in Bali. And as I was talking to people there, I had a sudden sense of other people had easier access to their own sense of intellect. They were speaking well. They were speaking elegantly. It was nice to experience that. And people weren't really afraid of their own smarts, ultimately. Um, and I had this sudden sense of envy almost, or oh, I wish I could be like that, and a slight resistance at the same time, all kind of going on at once. And it's interesting because I noticed myself in those moments not being as good a conversationalist as I would have liked. I found myself dumbing myself down, even though it wasn't appropriate as a context. And I noticed that my accent even was getting a little bit less what it is. All of these things to kind of step away from a certain way of being. And I'm not sure, well, I wasn't sure what caused that. And then I've been reflecting on it, and I think it's partly down to how I was treated at school when I behaved a certain kind of way. So, for whatever reason, I started using quite grown up language quite early on at school, and I would get bullied for that kind of thing. I would be made fun of for using a bigger word or a very grown up word, or just the kind of things that kids wouldn't say in that kind of context. And I would talk about things that they weren't necessarily smarter than other people's comments or conversations, but they were just on different topics, I think. So it didn't fit. The vibe wasn't quite right in a school childlike environment. So I think the bullying, the comments, the criticism, the jokes, the laughing at me for using inappropriate kinds of language or speaking in an excessively formal, perhaps, way, which I would now regard as excessively formal, but at the time I didn't realize. And now, actually, that way of speaking fits many contexts, right? I think I learned that it wasn't safe to express myself in those ways, which means that I packaged it up in my head as this is bad. This is not a way that is good for me to be. So I need to protect myself against whatever that way of being brings up, which is attack. So essentially, what I learned, I think, is to slightly back away from those things. Where once I had a proclivity to lean into those things and really go for it, over the years there was a resistance because it didn't go well when I tried when I was a child. And that's, I think, what was happening at Kai Camp. At times, I didn't feel like I had internal permission to be the same way that other people around me were perfectly comfortable being like. And that was grating, honestly, to notice that I have my own internal, slightly anti-intellectual resistance to speaking nicely, to using nice complex sentences, big words, and leaning into articulating myself as clearly as I can, regardless of how that may sound to other people, whether that may sound excessive to other people or overly fancy, overly smart, whatever it might be. That's something I'd like to undo. I would like to be able to enjoy my language. I'd like to be able to enjoy articulating my thoughts as precisely and clearly as I can, particularly in those contexts. So I need to undo some of this programming. It's something to do with safety now, I think. At school, it wasn't safe for me to be that way. I would get attacked. There are various things it wasn't safe for me to be like at school, and that's a different conversation. But this specific one is something I think can easily be undone just by recognizing that it's there. And each time I catch myself withdrawing or dumbing down or doing various things to sound like I'm not allowed to have that conversation, at least to myself, I can I can notice that and choose to lean in. There'll be an unfamiliarity there, I think. Even now when I'm talking, I can hear myself speaking more in a way that I think would sound weird in person. But just by noticing that, I can choose to lean in, be unfamiliar, and hopefully, as I keep doing that, recalibrate such that I realize actually it's safe now. There's nothing bad that will happen if I bring all of myself to bear. And there's something deeper here as well, because this is basically shadow work in a sense. There's a bunch of things that it felt like when I was a child that felt unsafe, that were unsafe for me. And the way I managed those things was to reject them. It wasn't safe to be that way. So I pushed them away, told myself they are bad, and now they're in my shadow. The disappointing thing about this is, the unfortunate thing is that those things are who I was and perhaps who I still am. So in a sense, I'm realizing that the things I have been avoiding, often, I wouldn't say dislike in others, but resist in others, is coming up only because it reminds me of all the things I'm not allowing myself to be now, that I was when I was a child. And that's sad and exciting at the same time. So I guess this is just a little intention setting into the universe that I would like to welcome those parts of me back in, love them, allow them to feel safe, and see what happens as they now evolve from this position as a 34-year-old, as opposed to what I did to suppress them when I was 12 or similar. So I have no idea what will happen. I'm excited to find out, but here is a commitment to bring more of myself fully into conversations, moments with people, various things where I may have suppressed it in the past. And if this sounds familiar to you, I'd love to hear examples of things that maybe you suppressed, that didn't feel safe, that were treated as bad, or that you had to label as bad to feel safe, that now maybe you can bring up more and more, because the more examples we have of these things, I think the easier it is to start noticing that this is even a thing and start the process of healing from that initial protective move that we may have made to stay safe before. So looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.